Hello YouTube, we've made progress. We have a harmonic balancer, we have a cam installed, the cam has had its end play adjusted, we've degreed the cam, and we have checked piston to valve clearance. So the cam is installed. How did we get there? We started by installing the cam. We're going to put the first part in. And this is an Edelbrock RPM Performer hydraulic roller cam. And they want assembly lube on the sprocket and the bearing surfaces. And they want oil on the cam lobes. Nice and gentle. All right, some more assembly lube and oil. And very gentle here and patient. Now, before I push it all the way in, I'm going to hit the bearing, the distributor, the bearing surface, because we pretty much wiped it all off going through all the other bearings. And just so you know, I cleaned these bottles before I set them in here. I didn't set dirty bottles into my engine. We've heated the lower gear to 200 degrees, and that should help it slide on. I've got the crankshaft set up so that the keys are upright, and we want to be on 0. So there's 0, and slide it on, check to make sure it's on 0. It is, and it's seated. Now we got to let that cool, and it's a press fit. We have the lower sprocket set at 0 degrees advance or retard. And you can see that because the 0 is lined up with the key. But that's not the 0 that you line up with the timing gear for the cam. If you look very closely, right there is another 0. And that 0 has to be vertical and lined up with the gear for the camshaft. So we have to turn this crankshaft so that that's dead up. That's close. For this hydraulic roller cam, there's a cam button that goes on the end to limit the play. We're not going to worry about that just now. We're only going to worry about degrading the cam. What we have to do is set the chain on the upper sprocket. Find the mark on the sprocket. There's a nice mark right there. So this pin, has to turn. And what we're doing is timing the camshaft to the crankshaft. Oh. That's close. Let's move this just a little more. Okay. And we'll put a bolt in there just to hold it. Now, before I tighten them up, I want to make darn sure that these pins are lined up. And the best way to do that is with a straight edge. Right at the bottom of this sprocket tooth is the zero that we were talking about that's different from the zero that's on the keyway. So that zero is right there, that's right there, that's a center. If we put a straight edge on it, they should all line up. So there's the two on the keyways, and the center lines up, we're good. The next step is degreeing the cam. Why do we have to degree the cam? Why don't we just put it in? I mean, it's supposed to be perfect, right? Well, what you have is one manufacturer of a cam, another manufacturer of a timing chain sprocket and chain, another manufacturer of the crankshaft, all of which could have slight variations in their manufacture. So that could mean even though everybody did theirs within spec, it might be out of spec because everybody was just a little bit off in the same direction, which made everything out of spec. So really, when we degree a cam, all we're doing is checking that the manufacturers did what they were supposed to do. To degree a cam, you need a couple things. You need a degree wheel. And what's important with the degree wheel are the degree markings. All the other stuff is not necessary, you just need the degrees. You need the crankshaft bolt, a straight edge. You have to make yourself a little pointer to put on the block to point to the degree wheel. This is just out of coat hanger. A wrench to tighten down the pointer. Socket and ratchet to turn the crank. Paper to write your results down on, a dial indicator, flashlight, and lastly, the cam card. And why do we need the cam card? Because on the cam card it lists the center lines of the intake and the exhaust. With the two dots lined up, we're at a point where the manufacturers are saying we're at top dead center. And what we want to do is find true top dead center. So if this is top dead center, and we rotate one way and then rotate the other way, it should be even. And essentially that's what we're going to do. We're going to bracket what they call top dead center and find out where true top dead center is. Now, that sounds complicated, but it really is. It's very easy. First thing we have to do is put a degree wheel on. And it just bolts onto the crankshaft with the crankshaft bolt. Now, some are fancy and turn and all that, but this just tightens down on the crankshaft, and that's what you've got. But in order to read this, you have to make a pointer. And I made a little pointer out of a hanger, and I even went so far as to sharpen the end so I can get a very good reading. And we'll just screw that in anywhere on the block, any convenient spot. With our pointer set up at what should be top dead center, we'll turn the degree wheel to where top dead center is, and we'll tighten it in place. And move the degree wheel just a little bit. All right. The reason I hit this with an impact gun is because I want to be able to rotate back and forth so that we can bracket the top dead center of the piston. And that brings us to the next topic. We have to set up our dial indicator on the top of the piston. This is the number 1 cylinder, and this is the cylinder that's supposed to be at top dead center. And we'll take our dial indicator and clamp it to the head, and we'll loosen up the indicator so we can move it around. And we want to depress the dial so it's in the mid-range, and we want to get it as straight up and down as we can, and then tighten it in place. And now we'll verify that it's straight up and down by looking at it at different angles. This one needs to be turned just a little bit. Okay, that's straight up and down. That's straight up and down. Now, to find out where true top dead center is, what we're going to do is rotate the degree wheel to a point where our dial indicator drops 50 thousandths into the bore. And then we're going to take a reading. Then we're going to rotate in the other direction, take a reading, and average the two, and that'll give us top dead center. So let's rotate clockwise. And you always want to take your reading going clockwise because you want to stretch the chain in the direction that the engine's rotating. And we want to take the dial indicator to 50 thousandths. Oops, way too far. Now if you go too far, you got to go back beyond it. And then come to it. I find it's easy to lift with my knee because I can apply even pressure to 50 thousandths. So the piston has fallen 50 thousandths into the bore, and we're going to read degrees after bottom dead center. So we have 0, 90, 180, 190, 192, and we'll record that reading. And this is the form I've got. We're finding true top dead center. We're measuring at 50 thousandths. The first reading we've taken is 192 after bottom dead center. And we're going to do the same thing by rotating in the other direction, and then we're going to average it. So we bring it back to 0, where we say top dead center is, and go 50 thousandths into the bore again. And you want to be very accurate. Went too far. Got to go too far anyway because we want to rotate in the clockwise direction as the last move. Right there. Again, we're reading after bottom of the center, so that 0, 90, 180, 170, and it's actually a half a degree below 170, so we got 169.5 degrees. So if we add our two results together, the 192 and the 169.5, we end up with 361.5. We want to divide that by 2 to get the average. So the end result of our calculations is we had 192, 169.5, add them together, you get 361.5. Take 361.5 and divide it by 2, so we averaged the two. We end up with 180.75. So true top dead center is equal to 180.75 degrees after bottom dead center. So this is 180 degrees. That's 181 degrees. We want to be as close to 3/4 of a degree beyond what we think top dead center is to be a true top dead center. So if we rotate the dial, so now the dial is setting at what is true top dead center. Now what we have to do is turn the degree wheel so that this indicates true top dead center. I feel there's 3 steps in degreeing a cam, and we've just completed the first step. Not that complicated. All we did was average the height of the piston using the degree wheel and found true top dead center. Now, we're going to do the same thing with the intake lobe of the camshaft. We're going to go to what the manufacturer says is the center line of the cam, and then we're going to bracket that on either side. We're going to average it, and that will tell us what the true center line of the cam is. This is the cam card that I've got with this cam. You should get a cam card with every cam. This card just happens to be on a sheet of paper. What we're looking at is center lines, and the center line for the intake is 109 degrees after top dead center. So what we're going to do is rotate our degree wheel to 109 degrees after top dead center. There's 0, there's 90, there's 110. We want 109, so we want to be right there. So we go to exactly 109. Oop, too far. That's 109 right there. So this is 100, that's 110, that's 109. Now we have to set up our dial indicator. We'll put some lube on some lifters just so that they go up and down real nice. These are rollers, and the bridge goes towards the center of the motor. And when you put them in, you want to make darn sure that the roller sits square on the lobe. I have found that these links are sometimes on backwards, and that puts the roller at about a 30-degree angle, and you will destroy your cam. We've moved our dial indicator to a better position. We put a push rod in here, and it can be any length push rod. It doesn't have to be the right one. And what we want to do is set the dial indicator up in a straight line with the push rod and the push rod in a straight line with the lifter. Making sure that you have enough range in your dial indicator to do what needs to be done. All right, let me check. Could be just a little more. And a little more this way. And we zero out our dial indicator. With our dial indicator set to 0 and our degree wheel set to 109 degrees after top dead center, we're going to rotate the degree wheel. And this time we're only going to rotate 20 thousandths because the cam may have an asymmetrical profile. So if we cut down the range at the top of the cam, we might be more accurate. If you go to the 50 thousandths, your readings might be a little screwed up. Let's rotate 20,000 degrees into the bore. There's 10. Too much. Remember, you always want to go in the direction of rotation, so we got to go clockwise. Okay. So there we go. So what we're doing is intake center line. The cam card says it should be 109 degrees after top dead center. Our first measurement after going down 20 thousandths is, so after rotating 20 thousandths in, we have 120, 130, 135, 136, and not quite 137, so it's 136.75, I'd say. So we're measuring center line. The cam card says 109 degrees after top dead center. We're measuring at 20 thousandths in. The measurement we got, the first measurement we got was 136.75 degrees. Now we'll rotate in the other direction. There's 0, that 109. And now we'll go 20 thousandths down. And then we got to come back, so we're rotating in the right direction. And that's it. Again, after top dead center, this is 100, that's 90, that's 80, that's 81, 82, 83 degrees. After all the figuring is done, the intake center line, the cam card says 109. We measured at 20 thousandths into the bore. We ended up with 137 degrees and 83 degrees. We added that together, we got 220. Divided by 2 to average, we got 110. So our true center line on the intake is 110 degrees. That's 1 degree off. So being 1 degree off, after top dead center, more than what the card says means that we're retarded, we're late by 1 degree. Now we have to do the same thing to the exhaust side, and this is step 3. We just completed step 2. It's not that complicated. You just do the same thing over and over for different center lines. Setup is the same. Now we want to rotate to the advertised center line of the exhaust valve, which is 115. 110 is right there, 115 is right there. So we'll come up to 115. We'll go by it and rotate in the right direction to 115. Now we have to set up our dial indicator. This time we put the push rod on the exhaust lifter, and we move our dial indicator over to the lifter, and we tighten it down. We check to make sure it's straight up and down, which it is. We zero it out. We're going to go 20 thousandths. That's 20 thousandths. We'll take a reading. Now we go again in the opposite direction. There's 0, going in the right direction to 20 thousandths, and take a reading. This is the results of the exhaust center line. Cam card says that it should be 115. We measured on either side of the 115 at 20 thousandths. We got 187 going one way and 142 going in another way. It totals 229. We divide that, average it by 2. We end up with 114.5. 114.5 is 1/2 degree late. I want to do the intake center line again because I have different results. I've practiced this and I came up with a different answer. So I want to do this one again. We're going to do intake center line. So we have intake center line, cam card, 109 degrees after top dead center. We've got the degree wheel set to 109 degrees after top dead center. 20 thousandths. That's dead on 20 thousandths. And we'll take a reading. We have 183 degrees measured at 20 thousandths in one direction. Now we'll get it in the other direction. Now we're going to rotate the other way. We've now rotated another 20 thousandths in the opposite direction. So what the data says is center line, cam card, 109, center line after top dead center, measured at 20 thousandths, we get 83 and 137. That adds to 220, we divide by 2, that gives us 110. 110 is 1 degree higher, and that's the result that we got the last time. It's off by 1 degree. We've installed the cam, we've degreed the cam, we've checked the backlash on the cam. There's one final thing we have to check, and that's valve to piston clearance. Now, if I hadn't changed the pistons, we wouldn't have to do that because we'd have the same setup. But I have new pistons in there, so I want to make sure that there's plenty of valve to piston clearance. And the way we do that is we have to mount a head. So I have in front of me everything to mount the head. I've got the bolts and the washers. The washers have been greased with ARP, and we're ready to start the install as soon as we put in the alignment dowels. We'll rotate the block so we got a flat deck to work on. Maybe it's easier to drive in the pins straight. And here's the first one right here. And the next one. We'll put some brake clean on a lint-free rag and clean the deck of the block. We don't want anything there when we put the head on. All right. Now we'll go clean the head. Now I'll clean the head, and the gasket's brand new, but I'll wipe the rag across it. Now, I guess there's two ways to check for valve clearance, but I don't have the light springs to do it with a dial indicator. So we're going to do it with some Play-Doh. We put the Play-Doh on the top of the cylinder, put a little oil on the Play-Doh, so hopefully it doesn't stick to the valve. Put our gasket on. Take our head and set it in place. There, it's on the dowels. It's not going to go anywhere. This is an Edelbrock head. They have 3 different size bolts. They have short bolts, medium bolts, and long bolts. And they all go in special places and they lay it out. The short bolts get torqued to 65 foot-pounds final torque, and the long bolts get torqued to 75 foot-pounds final torque. And we want to make sure that we got grease on all these washers. And these washers have a flat side and have a convex side. And the convex side goes towards the bolt. So now we got to grease these. You don't need a lot of grease. Now we'll put the washers on the bolt, making sure that we put them on the right way. These bolts go into a water jacket. So when we do our final install, we have to put sealant on the threads. But I'm not going to do this right now because I don't want to put the bolts in with the sealant in, take the bolts out, have the sealant cure while the bolts are out, and then put the bolts back in because then it won't torque right. We can now take the bolts and put them in their respective holes. The 4 short bolts go in these holes right here. The 4 very long bolts go in the raised bosses right there. The rest of the bolts are all the same length, so we can just fill the remaining holes. A little trouble getting by the spring there. Edelbrock says torque the short bolts to 65 foot-pounds and the long bolts to 75 foot-pounds. They want it in 3 steps following the factory tightening sequence. Then retorque is recommended after initial startup and cool down. Factory sequence is 30, 50, and then the final foot-pounds, whether it's 65 or 75. And we have a torque sequence here. I'm going to lay it right here and we're going to follow it. The first step is 30 foot-pounds in the sequence, and our number 1 is here. So we go to 30, right there. Number 2 is right here. Number 3 is right here. You get the idea. So now we go to 50 on all of them in the same sequence. 1, 2, 3. Now we have to take it to final spec. Final spec for the long bolts is 75 foot-pounds. We start with number 1. 75 foot-pounds. And this is going to be fun because it's going to roll away from me. Number 4 is a short bolt, and it goes to 65 foot-pounds. Number 5 is a short bolt. It goes to 65 foot-pounds. Number 6 is a long bolt. We'll put a little assembly lube on some lifters and slide them into the lifter ports with the bridge towards the center. And when you do that, you want to make sure that the rollers are square to the cam. I've seen it where these links are on backwards, and when you put the lifters in, they look normal, but the roller's at a 30-degree angle to the cam, and it'll destroy your cam. In the Gen 5 454, there's 2 different length push rods. The long one is the exhaust, and the short one is the intake. Making sure that we're down in the center of the lifter. We take a rocker arm and put it on and slide on the adjuster and the lock. Do the same thing on the intake. Leave them screwed all the way out. Back the lock out. Putting your fingers on the rocker arms, you rotate the crank until one of them opens up and the intake opened up, so the exhaust is all the way down, and we can adjust the exhaust. You adjust the exhaust by taking the push rod and moving it up and down until there's no movement. There's 2 different ways to do this. You can do it by going up and down, or you can do it by turning the rod. Supposedly turning the rod is not as accurate as up and down because you can continue to turn it after it's made contact. We'll turn the adjuster knot a half a turn in, and then we'll tighten the lock down. Like so. And now we're going to do it until the exhaust valve opens and we can do the intake. And the exhaust valve is open. We can adjust the intake valve by pushing the rocker arm up and down until we got no slack. Rotate a half a turn. And lock the lock down. Now, these locks should be approximately the same length down. If you see one that's higher than the other, then something's wrong. But these are equal, so we think we're okay. And what we do now is go through several revolutions. Okay, we've gone across the tops of the lobes several times. We'll come back to top dead center, thereabouts. Now we take it all apart. Now we can remove the head and hopefully the Play-Doh stays in place. And it did. So you can clearly see the impression of the intake valve and a little bit of the exhaust valve. And we'll cut this open. And there's a cross section. And you can see the impression of the intake, and that's the cross section. So we have lots of room for that intake valve. I think we've met our goals. We've got the cam installed, we've got it timed, we've got it degreed, we've got the end play set on the cam, and we've checked for our valve clearance. We know this cam is going to work with this pistons. If you enjoyed this video, there will be more.